Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. The midterms are upon us. The midterms are upon us. They're approaching us like the British approached us all those hundreds of years ago. They're fast approaching, and it's very important for the sake of the Republic, the future of the Republic, that you participate. This is kind of like the curtain call for democracy. That's, pretty much how serious it is and how serious it has gotten. They did a survey here, a polling, if you will, of the American people to see what, is the number one concern on voters' minds. And, you know, kind of unusual, the number one thing that seems to be on voters' minds is the threat to democracy. Now, we know that the power is in the hands of the people. And as I've constantly reminded you on this broadcast, baby, turn that down some too. Just leave it on the outside. As I constantly reminded you, excuse me. As I constantly reminded you on this broadcast, we thank God that the MAGAites are in the minority when it comes to the power of the people. The midterm elections are going to be like a final curtain call when it comes to which direction will we go with this democratic experiment that's still, in its young stages. 230 some odd years, if I'm not mistaken here, is not, very old for a country, for the Republic. If it's, 500 years before the nation fell, 1,000 years before the nation fell, that's something of significance. But 200 some odd years of a free republic, a democratic society, free from tariffs, tyranny from England, is not really that old. And we are in somewhat of a tailspin. Now let's take a brief walkthrough, if you will. Always looking for the solution. Always looking for the solution. So let's take a brief walkthrough, if you will, to see how we got here. Now, I've stated in the past, and I'm gonna go into it again, as far as the Republican playbook is concerned. We haven't had these big conspiracies, big investigation of serious wrongdoings in the Oval Office, like, for instance, Watergate, bribes against a free and foreign country, incitement of insurrections. We haven't had this on the side of the left, of the Democrats. And it is what it is. We have to call a spade a spade. The threat to democracy is one's belief, or the belief of the people, that the election was free and fair. Now, in 2016, America took a hard right turn, and went somewhat unorthodox in putting a candidate on the ticket who won his party's nomination, who was, pretty much in the real estate and reality TV. No really experience in law. Excuse me. No real experience in law, military experience, or any of the things that has made some of America's past presidents great. And he came in really unhinged. I mean, really unhinged. this candidate come in, encouraging violence, making threats, telling lies, conspiring to join in allegiance with a foreign enemy, encouraging rogue internet companies like WikiLeaks to, you know, crash into America's secrets, hack into America's secrets, and put them all out there for the world to see. This past president has stated that he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and his numbers wouldn't change. Now, once there was nobody around to tell him, no, you can't do that, then all bets were off. It slowly snowballed from there. So, the Republicans went out on a limb. They put the former president in office, hoping that once he got in, he would change and become more presidential. But all the former president did was attack our institutions, question the legitimacy of law-abiding institutions that are vital to keep the country going with a fair system of checks and balances. Attack them, undermine them. And, it's still going on, sadly, right now. You would think that, being that this former president lost the Oval Office and caused the Republican Party to lose the House and the Senate, that he would be an afterthought now. But he's still in the mix. Right now, the Republican Party is still the party of Trump. So with the midterms coming up, to fix this fragile democracy, here at Soluble, our stance is, and our belief is, the solution to it is to beat the Republican Party twice. No and ifs or buts about it. Now, we're showing strong signs of getting the voters out. We had a race that was won in Upper New York. I don't really recall the candidate's name, but we had a Democrat win there. And then we had a Democrat win in Alaska, which is kind of a telltale sign of how our numbers are, how we're getting our numbers out, how we're getting our people out to vote. But, for the sake of democracy and to fix a fragile democracy that has been made fragile by the former Republican president, who, as I said, he did everything in his power to undermine, and is still doing everything in his power to undermine our institutions. And is very much made democracy fragile. No one, at least myself, and I think a lot of people, I can speak for a lot of people when they say they were somewhat taken aback that the Republicans would put this kind of immoral, unethical person in office. But it happened. And we saw nothing but negativity. The president come in with blood on his hands. As I said, impeached twice. Really, really unqualified for the office that he held. His aides did the best they could. The aides he had around him that he didn't fire, they did the best they could to try to help hold it together. To try to keep, what we saw largely as a unhinged, somewhat lunatic of a president in office. And it's been stated by members of his own previous administration that, if he was reelected, it would be irretrievably broken. But, nevertheless, he did a great job in tearing it down in the 4 years that he was there. And because he couldn't get a second term, he really, really tried to break it. To the point where, as the former administration official said, it would be kind of irreparable, unable to be repaired unless, America went to war with itself again. And, we can plainly see now, we may as well call a spade a spade. Um, you know, people make mistakes. The Republic can make a mistake, but how do we fix a fragile democracy? By recovering from the mistake. As I said, right now, as I speak here at Soluble, the Republican Party is still the party of Trump. And I mean, it's a sad day. It's a sad time in America when we have, you know, our foreign allies, leaders of these allied countries, looking to America as a beacon of freedom, fairness, a government of the people. And when they start to see these kind of actions beginning in 2016, you know, they begin to question us as a country, as a democracy. They wanted to know if we still held true to the same ideals and beliefs, and that's just because that's how bad it was. That's how rapidly the ship was sinking, and there were no Republicans bailing water on this sinking ship. They were just pretty much along for the ride, even though the ship began to toss to and fro and rock back and forth. The only one seemed to be bailing water were, a handful of Republicans who didn't go MAGA extreme and the Democrats. So, in a nutshell, the first thing we can do, the first step that we can take in order to fix this fragile democracy is to go to the polls. It's not a cure all, because once we get our numbers up and get the officials in office that we want in office, then we have to still push, persuade by any means necessary to get them to fulfill their campaign promises that they made, now that once they're in office. Now, it's going to take bipartisanship. Right now, very few Republicans are willing to step up. We had Congresswoman Cheney and Congressman Kinzinger, just to name a few, that really stepped up. Senators and congressmen in the past, Senator Flake, Congressman Corker out of Tennessee, just to name a few. At a time where we needed these senators and congressmen, to pull their head out of the sand and really stand up and defend democracy, they either couldn't or wouldn't do it because they were intimidated by Trump and his supporters. His ability to rile up his supporters based on his lies, to be an instigator. He's great at it. And this it's played a big role, with this president not having no ethics, not having really no regard for the rule of law. It's played a big role in how and where and how fast democracy has fallen. Now, as I said, he had his term, but America wouldn't give him a second term. And, the former president, he felt that. He realized it. So to save face, because, we realize now that there's nothing worse in this former president's eyes than being a loser. There's nothing worse. So once he saw that the Trump brand, for the first time in a long time, because he's been able to fly under the radar with tax schemes, being a tax cheat, and just getting over on the taxpayers with bankruptcy after bankruptcy. Now, for the first time, the former president realized that he was going to be outed, that the people were going to speak, and there was nothing he could do about it. So what did the former president do? Once he realized that President Biden was going to be a formidable candidate, if you will, a formidable foe, the former president began to make up lies begin to gin up, untruths about the election to cause the American people to lose faith in a free and fair election. And he's a great salesman. He's a great salesman. He's one of the greatest salesmen that America has ever produced. Only, when it comes to having someone in the Oval Office, being a salesman is not one of the best attributes that a president can have when it comes to dealing with the lives of everyday people, especially if you're selling falsehood and deceits. It doesn't really, it hurts the American taxpayer, and it has in the past when he's, falsified tax record, falsified documents containing to his real estate holdings. But now you're talking about the lives of everyday people. So, being the great salesman that he was, he sold the election system, the whole voting process. He was able to sink it. He was able to cause people to doubt it and lose faith in the process. Only because, and this is only because he lost. We've never in history, in recent history or past history, some presidents have questioned the outcome, but to take it to this extreme where you refuse to concede, if you look at it in your heart of hearts, and you could tell yourself, even if you won't tell the American people, I fought a good fight. I put it all out there. I laid it all on the line, and I still come up short. It's dangerous when you can't do that and you want to lead a country. When you can't be honest with yourself and as well as others around you because you don't want to live with your shortcomings. That's what has causing democracy to be in the fragile state that it is. The former president came into office, sowing seeds of discord, and he left 4 years later, still sowing seeds of discord. So, as I said, the solution to all of this, to rewriting and rebalancing the Supreme Court, to giving a woman, to restoring a woman's right to choose, to get out of this rogue right extreme, the first step in the process is to vote. That's the first step. And then, we'll let the numbers come out. The primaries have been had. The people have come out and early voted by mail, voted on election day, etc. And no question, no candidate has complained. No candidate has questioned the process. And at the same time, you have the election officials and the people who are working at these polling places, at these election centers. They're doing recounts, they're doing hand counts, to check against the machine count to make sure everything is foolproof. Now, we don't want to go from bad to worse, which is where we'll be if we don't beat the Republicans twice, because they have proven to you, they have shown you who they are. So now it's time to believe them. They're willing to bust it all up through violence, through lies, through propaganda, through false investigation. They are willing to do anything to hold on to power. They're willing to do anything to hold on to power. The vast majority of Republicans right now in the Senate don't believe that more people voting is a good thing. And why is that in a democracy? You know, that speaks volumes just to how dangerous this party is. You know, we need the people on the right side of the aisle to come back to common sense politics. One man, one person, unethical, who has not, you know, in the words of the great John F. Kennedy, asked what he could do for his country. He's looked at all the benefits and all the ways that the country could benefit him. He has not took that age-old adage from Kennedy as far as serving country. To ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. He's turning it around. And he's looking for the benefits always. Not, you know, willing to serve the people. If he can save face from being a loser to stirring up chaos, to have the Capitol attacked, that's what he'll do. He'll continue to run roughshod over all of the American institutions that come up against him. The latest is the FBI. The latest is the FBI. And this president is always into something. He's always into something. And, you know, from 2016 to now, the things that he's been into or up to doesn't benefit America as a country. It doesn't benefit America as a country. So we're in a state of shambles now. The democracy is in a state of shambles because of the decision from the Republican Party to choose this person as the nominee, as a candidate to hold office. And he did nothing but insult the office, tear it down. And he was wholly unqualified. You know, when you're trying to fix something that is cracked, broken, you know, in this case, when it comes to politics, when it comes to dealing with governing, we have to start with the truth. We have to start with the truth. And the president showed time and time again that he was just, you know, some habitual pathological liar. It's just hard for him to tell the truth. And you know, one can understand that when you've been scheming, you know, doing underhanded things, you know, through your lawyers, you're finding, you know, what road can I take, you know, through my attorneys. I'm going to find out which path can I take to help me avoid or to get out of this underhanded situation that I'm in, or which path that can I take to take this underhanded situation that I've created through my own doing and make me come out squeaky clean. That's the president's interest. That's the former president's interest. It's not to do the right thing or to better himself or to put himself on the path of the truth, integrity. He's constantly, his whole life, look for ways to cover up the dirt that he's did, and at the same time, he comes out squeaky clean. That's what makes him, you know, as handed down to him from his father, that's what makes him a killer. But when you're governing, you're not, you know, you're dealing with everyday people's lives. These are the American people, the individual lives of the American people is not a business deal here and a business deal there. These are human lives we're talking about. These are human beings. So, you know, it's pretty much going to be, you know, up to the Democrats. It's going to be pretty much up to the Democrats and the never Trumpers. You know, we hope that the independents like what they're hearing. They like what they're seeing, you know, through the president's policies and through the levers that he's pushing are turning or what have you to do what it takes to make the lives of the American people better, like the Inflation Reduction Act. Gas prices are steady on the decline or on a slow decline. So, we know that even though it's not where we would like for it to be, we see a president who's rolling up his sleeves, taking action, and trying to do whatever it takes to keep America in the forefront of leadership when it comes to government and how we govern humanity. You see it right here, live in action, live and in effect. This is what it looks like. You voted it out. So now, in the democracy that we're in, you took a fragile democracy, the American people, the American voters. You took a fragile democracy and you somewhat righted the ship, and you put it in more smoother waters than what it was in just 2 years ago. But there's still work to be done to keep it out. You voted it out, you got it out. You took the fragile democracy and you began to put the pieces back together again to make it more stable. But there's more voting to be done. That's the system that we're in. You can vote it out and get it out, but in order to keep it out. And that's where we're at now. To fix this fragile democracy, we have to defeat the Republicans twice. And as I said, the numbers now, the way they're coming out in these primary elections, these special elections, it looks like our numbers are where they should be. So, we can look at the American way of life, the things we enjoy, our everyday lifestyle of work hard, play hard. Anything that has to do with age-old Americana. Those days will be fast approaching an end if we slack up, lest we forget. Now, historically, a Democratic president going into the midterms has not fared too well. Clinton had to deal with it. Obama had to deal with it. Now we have President Biden. Now, as I said, if you don't want a party that's only interested in investigating, you have to come out for the Democratic ticket, or to say the least, the independent candidate, if there's a viable one with solid ideals that are going to catapult America, into a leadership position continually in the 21st century. The Republican Party has no answers. So the message that we send when we get our numbers up, when we turn out to vote, it will send the message that this is not the way that the American people want to go. The vast majority of Americans want these things investigated. If there's anything that they feel like is a threat to democracy, anything that the former president is doing or done, the vast majority of Americans want them investigated. They want the leaders and the people in leadership roles at the Department of Justice or wherever. They want them, excuse me, they want them to plunge head first into what is going on to see if there's any there. So, there is no argument. You will see the Republicans come out and say, they're attacking the president. They're using Gestapo tactics. They're doing this just because they don't like him. Defending a dishonest person. A person who has sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution. And even though he's doing anything but, You have Republicans, rallying around him, or just not saying anything. They're not saying anything to disrupt or try to dismantle or try to stop or shoot down whatever the former president is doing that is a threat to democracy. Nor are they coming out with any legislation on the House floor that would make the things that the president is doing harder to do in the future by any other president. The goal is to fix a fragile democracy that has become fragile because of the narcissistic person that we put in office. We've never seen anything like this before. But as I said, people make mistakes. But the Republican Party has yet to acknowledge, on the whole, that they've made a mistake. You have veteran Republicans like Senator Tim Scott here a couple of months ago presenting Trump at one of his rallies or one of his speaking engagements saying, "Give me my mean tweets and $2 a gallon gas." As if the worst thing that the president did in office was put out mean tweets. These tweets were inflammatory. These tweets caused his followers to take action. Therefore, threatening innocent lives or causing people's lives to be ended. There was a monetary dollar. There was a dollar amount put on the damage that was done to the nation's capital on January the 6th of 2020. There was a dollar value attached to the amount of damage that was done there. But the one thing you will hear the president come out and say in a fragile democracy right now, that's only gonna make it more fragile. That's only gonna turn up the heat more. The one thing you can hear the president come out and say, in spite of the damage, the dollars, hundreds of thousands, millions, or whatever the amount has been done to the Capitol. The one thing that the president has assured his followers that if he gets in office, he's going to pardon. He's going to pardon these people. Very weasel-like. Very weasel-like. So the fragility that we see in our democratic republic is not going to go anywhere if it's up to the Republicans to make the change. It's not. It's going to only get worse. It's going to only get worse. So, do we walk in fear of a civil war? Do we walk in fear of, what lie or untruths that the former president would stir up the next time to cause more bloodshed and more innocent lives to be lost? Do we walk in fear of that? Or do we go out to the polls now in even bigger numbers? If you've enjoyed your way of life in America, the freedoms of the press, the freedoms to peaceably assemble, the freedom of speech, these things are definitely under threat now. They're under threat if we don't do our due diligence. The first thing and the most powerful thing that we can do as the American people, who really hold the power in their hands because they have the power to vote in or vote out. So, as a country, we're the leaders of the free world. Here in Jacksonville, Florida, I've worked with immigrants from different nations, and one thing that they all tell me that I noticed that they say, there's no place like America. They're trying to get here. They're doing everything in their power to either, move up in the line, whatever it takes to gain citizenship in the fastest way possible, no matter what part of the world that immigrants that I've met in Jacksonville, Florida have come from. They all say that there's no place like America. So as American citizens, it would be very foolish and counterproductive for us to take the freedom that we have here in this country that we were born into. It would be very foolish of us to take it for granted, to, you know, stand idly by and watch it continue to be threatened, continue to be attacked. And it's, I'm pretty sure, like most Americans, I'm amazed, somewhat amazed, that one person so full of untruths, so wholeheartedly unqualified, could hold this office and bring America to the point that he's brought it to. I mean, you know, a fragile democracy. It will only be more fragile or become more fragile when you see with your own eyes and you are discerning with your own intellect that this president is lying. This president is not telling the whole truth. This president is saying whatever he feel like it takes to save face from being called a loser. It's hard for this president to admit that he's wrong. He knows more about any given subject than the most qualified of personnel. You see how he stood over the shoulders of Dr. Fauci in a threatening way, ready to fire him, ready to shoot him down. And this man has been leading America through medical emergencies, pandemics, if you will, since, I was in high school. But yet along comes the former president, Donald John Trump. And he knows more. He knows more about coronavirus than Dr. Fauci. This is dangerous. And it will only continue to feed a fragile democracy to the breaking point. It would only begin to feed a fragile democracy to its breaking point. Now, for a long time, and it goes way back, and it's, as I've said, if you go into the Republican playbook, they've always tried to flip the vote through deceit, through lies, through trickery with butterfly ballots. They've always tried to meddle with the vote in some underhanded way. And now we're at a point where, it's pretty much been figured out and they don't know what else to do because it has been figured out. People are aware of the underhanded tactics that they will use when it comes election time. People are aware of that now. So what do? They're just right now seems ready to just strong arm and take it outright, even though it's not the will of the people. Even though it's not the will of the people. I mean, the hypocrisy is just, it's just overwhelming. But sleep well knowing that the power rests with the American people. I mean, the last two Republican presidents have not won the popular vote, but yet they were the president of the United States anyway, saved by the Electoral College, a process that should have long been done away with. But the last two presidents didn't win the popular vote. I mean, and to be, to call a spade a spade. Of course, there were many Democrats who were disappointed, upset in the year 2016 when they woke up and realized that for the next 4 years, Donald Trump was going to be president of the United States. There were a lot of Democrats set up. I mean, there were a lot of Democratic voters that took to the streets. And, with the president not winning the popular vote, even if one from an opposing party doesn't agree, you have to understand, the frustration there are some. You have to understand where the discontent is coming from somewhat. Because as I said, he didn't win the popular vote along with George W. Bush. But yet and still they were president. So, you may have had Democratic voters take to the streets, but not in a violent manner. They took to the street and exercised their right to peaceably assemble. That's what they did. And that is nothing that breaks the law, under the Constitution and the set of laws in which we live under and are governed by. They did nothing to break the law there. So, that's the difference. You have peaceful protests, and then you have a president who loses and incites a riot. And then, in pure Trump weasel fashion, he goes quietly away. He goes into his hole right after the insurrection. He goes into his hole. He's quiet. He's laying low. He want to see how it registers with the people. He want to see, if the Department of Justice, if the feds are coming at it, or if they're going to charge him with anything serious. And once he realizes that, as a former president, he's not going to be charged here, or he's not in trouble over there. They didn't impeach him, the second time around. He's right back. He rears his ugly head again and starts, wanting to remember Ashley Babbitt, but says nothing about Officer Sicknick. Come on. What kind of president is this? Will we fix a fragile democracy in this way? So you must send a message, because the Republicans who are backing the former president, they don't get it. It doesn't register with them. And we have to ask ourselves as American voters, what kind of party will we have in charge if we put the Republican Party back in charge and they're intimidated by one person, one unethical person, one person who doesn't know wholeheartedly anything about governing a country. If they're too intimidated to stand up to this, what does that say about them? Or what does that say about us if we vote them into a leadership position? This is unprecedented. We've never had a party in this country that was afraid to stand up to the truth. But that's where we're at in this fragile democracy. And this is what has played a key role in making the democracy and the republic as fractured as it is today. And because this party will not stand up for the truth against one man. And there we are. To the American voter, there we are. Plain and simple. What does it say about this party leading a powerful nation like America when they're afraid to stand up to one person? What does that say? We're going to have a part 2 to fixing a fragile democracy. Stay tuned this week for more of the same, when we're looking for a solution to fix a fragile democracy in America. It starts with the vote, and it starts with being educated and as to policy, as to positions of each party, and knowing where you, as the American voter, want to take America, the land of the free, home of the brave, a country with rights, privileges, and one of the best models of government known to mankind. It's going to be up to you to determine where it goes and how far it goes. So stay tuned for part 2 of this conversation later on in the week. This is Soluble. We'd like to thank you for joining us. And we say stay tuned for part 2. Stay informed and be ready in November to come out in huge numbers to fix a fragile democracy by taking the first step, which is to vote. So until we meet again, this is Soluble signing off. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. This is Soluble. Good night.